right. Welcome to today's data science seminar from the University of Washington's eScience Institute. As part of the University of Washington, we acknowledge the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters and the tribes of all tribes and bands within the Squamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. Our speaker today is Shima Abadi, who is an assistant professor at the University of Washington in Bothell. She obtained her PhD in mechanical engineering at the University of Michigan. And in addition to also being a dual master's degree holder in applied mathematics and mechanical engineering. She held a dual appointment while she was a postdoc at Columbia University as a visiting scientist here at the University of Washington in the School of Oceanography. Her research primarily focuses on acoustical oceanography as it relates to wave propagation and energy interaction with the ocean bottom. And all of that comes together with her interests, which include underwater acoustics, array signal processing algorithms to understand impact of seismic activities on marine mammals, improving the resolution of acoustic images, and locating sound sources in the ocean. Her talk today is entitled Listening to the Ocean, Sound of Rain and Wind. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David, for the nice introduction. So let me start with sharing my screen. Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's very nice to be here. Today, I want to talk about ocean sound and what we can listen in the ocean. And in particular, I want to focus on sound of rain and wind recorded underwater. First, I'd like to thank my students, Felix, John, and Matthew, who helped me in this project. Actually, pretty much all the figures and results that you see today in this presentation, they did the work, they did the hard work. So I want to thank them. I also like to acknowledge the funding in the Office of Naval Research for providing financial support for this project, and in particular, the Task Force Ocean. And I also want to thank OOI for providing data, and all the data set that you see in this presentation are provided by Ocean Observatories Initiative. Okay, what is ocean soundscape? If you have a hydrophone, and by hydrophone is basically a microphone that we use underwater, and if you put it underwater, you can hear different types of signals, different sounds. We can hear marine mammals. A lot of them are very vocal and always are calling or vocalizing. We can hear thunderstorm. We can hear earthquakes. We can hear ship noises or fish or many, many other types of signals or sources that we have underwater. In general, this is called ocean soundscape. And by just listening to that for a long period of time, we can learn a lot about the ocean environment and finding some patterns in the ocean ambient noise. The data that as I mentioned, the data that I want to use, and I show results today are from the Ocean Observatories Initiative, OOI, which is a great network, and there are recording arrays all around the globe, as you see in this map. There are hydrophones at 2 of these locations. Both are at the Northeast Pacific Ocean. 2 cables are providing data. One is regional cabled array, which, as you see on the bottom left-hand side, there are 2 cables. One goes from the shore to the axial volcano to the deep water, and one goes to the slope, a continental slope, and comes back to the shore. The other one is coastal endurance array, that all the instruments are pretty much on the continental margin, as you can see on the right-hand side panel. There are hydrophones, as I mentioned, on these arrays, in addition to many other instruments that we have. In general, we have 11 hydrophones, and 5 of them, actually 6 of them, are broadband hydrophones that are recording signals up to about 30 kilohertz or a little bit less. And then 5 of them are low frequency hydrophones and recording signals up to about 90 hertz. All the hydrophones are on the ocean floor, but ocean depth is different depending on the location of the hydrophone. So what we want to do is we want to use this data, which is a very rich data set, and it has been recording for a long period of time. We want to use this data to understand ocean ambient noise. And in particular for today, we just focus on sound of rain and wind. Our team has developed a Python package for accessing data. If you log into the OOI website, it's a little bit hard to get to the hydrophone data. Most of the data set, because they're not that big, you can see them in the portal, but you need to do a couple of steps in order to get the hydrophone data because it's so big. But we have developed this Python package that is available and you can use it to have access to the hydrophone data and some other analysis that we need to do in order to use the data set. There is a very nice tutorial in GitHub that you can basically see and learn how to use OOI Pi. Just to give you an idea about the location of the hydrophones, so what I'm showing here is the two cluster of hydrophones that we have by two black circles, and shipping routes in this area. This is a shipping density that we have. And as you can see, all hydrophones are pretty much very close to the main shipping routes, so we get a lot of ship noises. We also get a lot of earthquakes. As here you see the number of earthquakes that we had in the last 5 years in the area, and a lot of them are on the plate boundaries as expected, and the location of some of the hydrophones are shown here. We also have hydrophones very close to the axial seamount, which is a underwater volcano, and erupted in 2015, and we were able to capture that signal. So this is just an idea about the environment and what type of signals we may hear. We also hear a lot of marine mammals in this area. So just give you an example of the different type of signals that we received in the hydrophone data. Here I show a sample spectrogram of the data. And if you're not familiar with a spectrogram is a type of figure that we use. Instead of listening to the signal, basically we convert the audio signal to an image. And in that image, we have time on x-axis and frequency on y-axis, and color represent the loudness of signal. So if you see a red color, it means the signal in that frequency in that particular time period is loud, and if it's blue, it's not that loud compared to the other ones. So what we see here, let's take a look at. What we see here is a lot of pinwheel calls that they are vocalizing their regular 20 Hz signals, as you see in this spectrogram. We also get a lot of local shipping noises, as you see. Those are the broadband signals in the spectrograms, and also some microseism noise that are usually focused on very low frequency. This is a sample spectrogram of one of the low frequency hydrophones. So as you can see, the frequency that we have is up to 90 Hz. We cannot see what is beyond that frequency. But if you use the broadband hydrophone data, we can see much higher frequency components. What I want to show you today, basically, I want to talk about 5 different things. First, I will show you some pre-processing steps in order to get the hydrophone data and do some processing in order to convert that to spectral levels that we use for analysis. And in part 2, we focus on some figures and analysis of long-term ambient noise in general. And then part 3, we focus on wind ocean noise, and part 4, we focus on ocean noise during rain. And then at the end, I talk a little bit about the minimum level of ocean noise, which we call ocean noise floor. Okay, let's start with pre-processing data. So for this project, we use 2 types of data, all recorded by the OOI network. The first one is obviously our acoustic data that we use hydrophone data for that. And the second type of data is wind measurement and rain measurement, which are measured by surface buoys, as you see in this figure. Usually the surface buoy is on top of the hydrophone, but not exactly at the same location with a little bit of displacement. So what I show here at two sites, at two different locations, I show the location of hydrophone that I show by H and the location of surface buoy that I show by B. And the north direction and east directions are shown here. So you can see that there are some displacement between the surface buoy and the hydrophone. And later in the talk, I refer to this figure because it will cause some delay between acoustic measurement and rain and wind measurement that we need to fix. We want to do some simulation first to understand what is the coverage area. If you have a hydrophone, let's say at 80-meter depth, what's the coverage area that we can get the signal from? So in order to do the simulation, we need to have a speed of sound profile. Again, if you're not familiar with ocean acoustics, having a speed of sound profile is critical for any studies in ocean acoustics, basically, because the speed of sound is not constant in the ocean. In air, speed of sound is almost constant, so we can assume it's just a single number, it doesn't change at all. But in the ocean, it changes in depth. It also changes with other variables like temperature and salinity. So it basically changes from season to season, sometimes from day to night. So what I show you here, I show speed of sound profile that we got from CTD data from one of the OI locations, two of the locations actually, shallow side and deep side. Blue lines are a sample speed of sound profile in winter, and red lines are sample speed of sound profile in summertime. And as you can see in the summertime, because we have higher temperature close to the surface, the speed of sound is higher, and you see a dip as we go to the deeper part of the ocean. But in winter time, especially in shallow water, we can assume the speed of sound is almost flat. We use this data in order to do simulation, and we want to, as I said, we want to understand the effective listening area based on the location of the hydrophone. So what I show you here is when the hydrophone is at deep location and on the left-hand side, and then when the hydrophone is at the shallow location on the right-hand side, so we can compare the listening area on top of the hydrophone. I show you results for different frequencies, and also with one line for summertime and one line for winter time. Just on average, you can see that in shallow location, on average, we get something between 250 meter and 1 kilometer listening coverage area on the surface. But as we go to the deeper location, that number increases a little bit. The rule of thumb is that if you have a hydrophone at depth D, for example, the radius that you can listen to the signal is 3 times that number. This is with some simplification that we do. But for having a better idea, we did this simulation to understand that. So why do we do that? Let's assume that we have rain 1 kilometer, not exactly on top of the hydrophone, 1 kilometer from the hydrophone. The hydrophone can capture that data, but the surface buoy is not able to measure that rain yet, because rain is not at the surface buoy location. So there is a lag between that data, those two data sets that we're going to fix, and I will tell you later how to fix that. So that was the wind measurement and rain measurement. But when we use the acoustic data, we need to convert the acoustic data to a spectral level. Basically, a spectral level is a metric that shows how loud the signal is at different frequencies. There's a technique called the standard Welch technique that is very common in ocean acoustics. In the standard Welch technique, we divide the signal into different segments, and in each segment we calculate what is called periodogram. Periodogram is technically an average of the energy in that specific segment. And as you can see in these little figures that I show, a spectral level on y-axis and frequency on x-axis for each segment. Then we take the average of all these periodograms in order to calculate the spectral level at the end, which is the average of all the periodograms that we have in that specific time period. But as you can see here, we get a lot of spikes, those peaks that are from outliers that we get in the spectrogram. Also, you see some of them here. Those are the broadband impulsive signals that we have. We usually get that in the OI data because there are other instruments co-located with the hydrophones. So those are the interference that we get from other instruments. If we want to know, if we want to have a better estimate of the spectral level, excluding those interference, we came up with a modified Welch technique, which is basically very similar to the standard Welch technique, but at the end, instead of taking the average, we calculate a median of all the periodograms in order to remove the outliers. And as you can see, I show the red line is what we had before, and the blue line is what we generate using the modified version of Welch technique. And you can see a lot of those peaks are gone, and we have a better estimate of the spectral level. So that's how we do in order to find the spectral level versus frequency when we use the acoustic data. Okay, so now let's take a look at some long-term ocean noise analysis. What I show you here is a long-term spectrogram of one of the low-frequency hydrophones. This is the central caldera location, so very close to the axial seamount. And again, it's a spectrogram, so we see frequency on y-axis and time on x-axis, but it's a very long time period. It's almost 6 years of data. So we see a lot of things in this spectrogram that I want to emphasize. The first one is this spike, this broadband signal that we see in almost April of 2015. This is when the axial seamount erupted, and that's the eruption sound that we were able to capture in the hydrophone data. The other interesting thing is this noise, basically, that we see in this time period. It's summer of 2019, and there was an air gun experiment exactly on top of the hydrophone that we were able to capture that signal. Again, if you're not familiar with air guns, those are the type of experiments that usually oil and gas company conduct, but sometimes research, we do that for research in order to understand the seafloor and what is beneath that. So we send a very loud signal called air gun, and then by recording the reflected signal off the seafloor, we can do the imaging. So we are able to receive that signal in the hydrophone data. Again, one more interesting thing is this periodic signal that you can see. The center frequency is about 20 hertz. These are finwheel calls that are present in the area every year, and we see that every year. Some years it's the duration is longer. Some years it's shorter. Some years they are louder. So it depends on their population, how many finwheels we have, where they are, what's their migration pattern. But we are able to see them in the long-term spectrogram. This one is a long-term spectrogram of the broadband signal. So it looks a little bit different from what you saw before. That was low frequency signal because the frequency is much broader. And as you can see, we go up to 14 kilohertz here. And so the spectrogram is a little bit noisier. You see some interference from other instruments that we have. Some of these red areas are when we have rain, and some of them are when we have high wind speed, or but in general, if you look at this figure, it looks like that ocean noise is getting quieter as we go. So since 2016 up to 2020, it looks like it's getting a little bit quieter. So this is a type of analysis that we can do with broadband signal or with long-term analysis, and we are working on that basically to understand if it's going down, if the ocean noise is going down, if it's true, and if that's true, why why do we see that pattern? Okay, so just show you some results when we have wind basically in the area. We analyzed more than 11,000 hours of data. And going back to the map of hydrophone that we had, in this time, we're going to use only 2 hydrophones. One is at the shallow site, depth is 81 meter. One is at deep site, depth is 580 meter. And here I'll show you some sample spectrogram during wind noise. So you can see that the whole area, the whole plot is the sound level is higher. And you see a lot of green and yellow area, which shows that signal is loud. I can play that for you. So just listen to the wind noise. You know how wind sounds in the air, but let's see how it sounds in the underwater. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to characterize this noise and find out the relationship between a spectral level that we get in acoustic data with the wind speed that we get from the surface buoy. Just to show you a sample wind speed data, this is 1 minute of wind speed. You see that it's noisy. We smooth that data with a moving average filter, and then we use that to analyze data. Again, as I said, we have more than 11,000 hours of data. So we do the analysis, we use the modified Volge technique to get the spectral level, and then we use wind speed measurement to know the wind speed during each power spectral density, basically. And then we take the average of all the data, and what you see here is the average shown by solid line and a portion of the standard deviation by shaded area. So you see how loud the signal is on y-axis and frequency on x-axis, and shallow location result on left-hand side and deep location on right-hand side. So what do we see here? First of all, you can see that different colors have different spectral level. Different colors are representing different wind speed categories, as you can see in this table. So as we go to higher wind speed, the noise gets higher. We go to higher spectral level. So that was expected. So what we see, especially in shallow location, is the standard deviation at low frequency is higher than other frequencies and compared to the deep location. And that's because it's not just wind that we are measuring, we're also measuring other noises that we have. So in general, in shallow location, because it's closer to the coast, we get a larger standard deviation. But let's take a look at each frequency range and compare the shallow location with deep location. So in this frequency range between 20 Hertz and 200 Hertz, we see that in deep location, the spectral level is much higher than shallow location. And actually, we are able to see this peak right here around 50, 60 Hertz. That is not due to wind, local wind, and it's due to distant shipping and distant storms that we get. The distant noise is able to get to the deep part, but it's not able to pass the slope and be recorded by the shallow location. So that's why we see that in the deep location, but not the shallow location. The other frequency range is between 200 Hertz and 3 kilohertz. We were able to fit a linear regression model that we show by dashed line here. And it's a good model. As you can see, it fits data very well. And in general, noise is decreasing as we go to higher frequency in this region. And you see a complete separation between different wind speed categories. But as we go to the higher frequency between 3 and 25 kilohertz, you see that first we get a lot of noises from other instruments, and then you see that the slope is much higher compared to the previous frequency range. But one interesting thing that we see is that at very high wind speed, the slope is so much, it's dropping so fast, the spectral level is dropping so fast, which we didn't see before. And that's due to the bubbles that are created at the surface. So when we have very high wind speed, we get a layer of bubbles on the surface, and then that layer acts like basically masks the area. So the higher frequency sound of wind is not able to penetrate to the deeper part of the ocean, so spectral level drops much faster compared to the other wind speed categories. Okay, so that was a summary of wind speed, but let's compare what we found with literature, what people have published before. There are a couple of references in this field that we want to compare our results with, and we are showing that comparison here in this figure. Our data are shown with blue and red at deep location and shallow location, and you see other studies with black lines with different symbols. Usually our finding matches very well with other studies, but the two of them are a little bit lower than what we found, and that's because their location is different from our location. Their location is either a combination of open ocean and coastal ocean, or maybe just open ocean. But the other two studies that were their measurements were from the continental margin, they match very well with our results. We want to know what frequency range we expect to see the effect of wind noise. So we calculate the correlation between wind measurement and spectral level. At different locations, we get this result. So you can see that we have a relatively high correlation between about 400, 500 hertz and up to maybe 10 or 10 kilohertz or 15 kilohertz, and then it drops before and after that. One more thing before we move on to rain measurement is the spectral level versus wind speed. So what I showed you before was a spectral level versus frequency for different wind speed categories. But now let's take a look at spectral level versus wind speed for different frequencies. So x-axis shows wind speed, and I show different panels represent different frequencies. You see deep location, deep hydrophone in the top row and shallow hydrophone in the bottom row. Well, you see that there is a critical wind speed at a spectral level increases suddenly after that. And that is due to the generation of whitecaps. As we go to higher wind speed, we have whitecaps, and then the whitecaps basically has bubbles, and those bubbles are generating a louder signal when they collapse. So a spectral level, there's a two region basically. If you want to fit linear regression, we have to fit two linear regression model. And that's what we do here. The solid line shows the model that we have fitted into the data. Okay, that's enough with wind speed, wind noise. Let's move on and look at the noise when we have rain in the area. So we have analyzed about 280 hours of acoustic data when we know it's raining. This is a sample spectrogram of rain noise, and you see it's different from wind, right? We see some characteristic in that. Some frequencies are higher that we're going to discuss later. Especially look at the 15 kilohertz that we get some peaks. That's the signature of light rain or drizzle. Let's listen to the signal. So basically, we want to do similar analysis that we did with wind noise. This time, we look at we need to detect the each rain event, basically when it rains. So we define a threshold, and when rain rate is above that threshold, we call it a rain event. As you see, we have detected 6 events here. But as I said, there is a delay between acoustic measurement and rain measurement, and we're going to fix that here. How do we do that? So if you look at the spectrogram during rain, we see a spike here and we see a spike here. But when we look at the rain rate measurement, we see a spike here, and there is a little bit of delay. We want to fix that delay. In order to do that, first we calculate the noise power, which is the average of spectral level for all the frequencies that we have. So we get this power of energy with solid black line that you see, and the delay is clear. So we have a little bit of lag here. Then we, in the noise data, we need to interpolate, in the rain data, sorry, we need to interpolate rain data to get the same sample rate as the power data that we have. Then we calculate the correlation between these two time series and calculate the lag. And then we fix that, we shift the acoustic data in order to have both signals having the same, having peaks at the same time. Okay, when we do this correction, we can calculate the average spectral level for all the 280 hours of data that we have. And we do that for different rain rate categories. And here I just show you one rain rate, which when rain rate is small, and one category when rain rate is high. So this one, the top row is for 2 to 5 millimeter per hour rain rate, and bottom row is between 10 and 20. Again, different colors represent different wind speeds, and shaded area represent the standard deviation of data. So what we notice here is that in the frequency range between 201 kilohertz and between 1 kilohertz and 10 kilohertz, we can fit a linear regression model, actually 2 linear regression, one in each frequency range, to model this noise, and we get a good estimate with having 2 linear regression. We didn't want to have non-linear regression just to make it simple. And again, as you can see, when wind speed goes up, we get louder signal, spectral level increases, and in the high frequency region, it's very hard to have linear regression model. So we decided to use this model, which is a 5 coefficient nonlinear model. And that only model the spectral level between 10 to 25 kilohertz. The 15 kilohertz peak that I mentioned in the previous slide is here. You can see that, we can see it here. And we can see that when the rain rate is small. So it's the signature of light rain and drizzle. Okay, again, we want to compare our result with other measurements. So this is what we get. That's the average of all the wind speeds that we have. One thing that we notice is actually, let's go back to the previous one. One thing that we notice is that the noise that we measure during rain event, it's not only a function of rain rate, it's also a function of wind speed. So both wind speed and rain rate they have impact on the spectral level. So when we take the average of all the wind speed, this is what we get. And then we compare our data with some other measurements. We see that our measurements are a little bit higher. Again, that's due to the different environments. So Ma's environment was open ocean. Ocean is a little bit quieter in that area. Our region is closer to the continental margin, and we get a little bit more louder ocean ambient noise in general. We, again, similar to what we did with wind noise, we want to know which frequency range represent the rain noise better. So we calculate the correlation between a spectral level and wind speed, as you can see in the left panel, and the correlation between a spectral level and rain rate, as you see on the right panel. So relatively, if you compare these two, we have higher correlation with wind speed than rain rate. So wind speed is more important to know a wind speed, but there is a peak in rain rate at about 13 kilohertz. And if you look at the correlation with wind at 13 kilohertz, you see that the correlation is very low. So at this specific frequency, we get high correlation with rain, but very low correlation with wind speed. This frequency helps us for our future work when we want to estimate a spectral level from just knowing wind speed or rain rate or vice versa. You know, instead of having two variables involved, if you look at the spectral level at this specific frequency, we can only do the estimation just by having rain rate and not having wind speed. To show that, what I have here is the spectral level versus wind speed on the left column, and a spectral level versus rain rate on the right column. And you see results at 5 kilohertz on top and result at 13 kilohertz in the bottom. So you can see that at 5 kilohertz, spectral level shows a relationship with both wind speed and rain rate, but at 13 kilohertz, there is almost no relationship with wind speed, and only there's a relationship with rain rate. So that's a perfect frequency for estimating a spectral level with surface buoy measurements, or vice versa if you have surface buoy measurements and you want to have an estimate of a spectral level. Okay, last part. We want to take a look at ocean noise floor. So we want to know what is the minimum spectral level in the ocean when the ocean is quiet, and we call that ocean noise floor. In order to do that, we plot or calculate a spectral probability density of noise that we have for all the data that we have. This slide only shows 1 month of data, but we analyze the whole data set. So what you see here is the red line that shows 5th percentile of noise, and we use that as a metric for ocean noise floor. So that kind of shows the minimum of the noise floor. Again, you can see the peak at low frequency in deep location that you don't see in the shallow location, and that's due to distant shipping and distant storms. And again, you see a very wide area in the shallow location, especially in low frequency compared to the deep location, and it's because we get contribution from many other sources. So we define the ocean noise floor, and then we want to understand the relationship between ocean noise floor with other variables in the ocean in order to understand it a little bit better. Ocean noise floor is changing. What's the factor that is important in that analysis? We have included 3 variables in our analysis. The first variable is a fraction of time that at least one ship is within 15 kilometers of the hydrophone that we have. Basically, we want to know the effect of local shipping on ocean noise floor. The second variable is the average wind speed that we have. Obviously, when we have higher wind speed, the ocean noise floor is higher, like the other, like the whole ocean sound floor that goes higher, minimum also goes higher. So the second variable is average wind speed. The third variable is the average sound speed in the upper layer, the upper 80 meter layer, because we want to understand if temperature, specifically if temperature has impact on ocean noise floor, because temperature changes the speed of sound profile and then basically changes how sound propagates in the ocean. So what we do, we use a multiple linear regression, and I show results for shallow location in top row and for deep location in the bottom row. On the left column, you see regression coefficients for each variable that we have decided to use. And on the right column, you see p-value of the coefficients. I specifically want to focus on p-values because it shows how important that feature is. So what we see in shallow location, especially in the low frequency region, is that wind speed and the speed of sound is very important. So we need to have those in order to predict the ocean noise floor. But in the deep location, we see another pattern. In the deep location, ship noise and average wind speed has lower p-value, so that those variables are more important in deep location. So we see some site dependency here. In order to estimate ocean noise floor, we need to understand how it behaves at different locations. Okay, I guess that's it. This is the last slide I wanted to show you today. Thank you so much for your time. Just one takeout message. Maybe I was able to show you how rich this OOI hydrophone data is. If you are working in this whole field, maybe you are encouraged to use this data set. And OOI Pi is also a package that you can use to access the data set. I'm here to answer your questions. If you have time, I think we have a little bit of time.
We do.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shima. That was outstanding. Can you remind me? OOI Pi is code out of your group, right?
Yes.
Can you just talk for a minute about that code and all of the features that it can handle?
Sure. So when the format of acoustic data is mini seed format. So it's a format that usually people in seismology use, that not people in acoustics, they are usually not familiar with that. So what this package does is we get the data, and data is in a very small fraction of time. So you can, instead of downloading different fraction of time, you can just say, this is the start time, this is the end time. You can look at the whole data set in that time period. So kind of like the put them next to each other, attach them to each other. And then we can look at the spectral level. We can calculate the Welch technique that I just mentioned. And there is a function in order to calculate that. We have we have looked at some other data sets too. So like CTD data that we use for the speed of sound profile. You can have access to that. You can get it. We basically merge CTD data from multiple instruments, one at the surface, one at the shallow profiler, and one at the deep profiler. And there is also one measurement from different instrument in the seafloor. We merge them all in order to get to cover the whole water column. Let's see. I think there are other features that I cannot, maybe we can look at the density and the CTD data separately, look at density in addition to the speed of sound profile. And the spectrograms that I showed you, you can create the spectrograms very easily in the OOI Pi.
That's fantastic. So as a reminder to our audience, we are using the Q&A feature of Zoom webinar. So if you click on the bottom of your Zoom window, you'll see a little Q&A and you can type your questions in there. We do have one question so far. Have you noticed the impact of airplane noise for some of the military jets around the coast at the locations of your hydrophones? Would jet sounds get that far and that deep?
We have not looked at that. I think mainly because we don't have that data. But that's a great research question that we can basically look at the data if we have and see if we can see that.
Yeah, I do know that's a great question. I do know there is ADS-B historical data for that region, which is the aircraft reporting system. So that's interesting to be able to incorporate that. One of the questions that I had for you was, well, generally about the Doppler effect and how that impacts, you know, your analyses, and then I guess, you know, even bigger, like how does the effect of you know, frequency dependent signal propagation change the spectra that you see and how you interpret them?
That's a great question. So for ship, in order to analyze ship noise, we need to analyze Doppler effect because they generally move fast and we see that frequency shift. For marine mammals, it's not that it's not a big factor because they usually swim very slow. But if you want to look at the ship noises, what I showed you in the spectrogram, maybe I can go back. At the beginning, I showed an example of ship noises, these broadband signals. You are not able to see the Doppler effect because the time axis is very compared to the time of the ship noise is large. But if we zoom in, we are able to see the Doppler effect that you mentioned. And for the analysis, we should include that in the analysis.
Yeah. So this is multiple years that we're looking at here, right? So what is the sort of analysis window that you use? Is it minutes or seconds or hours? I guess I know you told me, but I think it kind of disappeared.
For the whole data, we have 6 years of data. This is spectrogram only shows 1 month of data.
1 month.
And in order to see Doppler effect, if you zoom in maybe in 1 day or half a day, or if you want to see it better, maybe a couple of hours that the ship is close to the hydrophone. It depends on the speed of ship, basically. But sure, you will see the frequency shift.
So we have a question from Matt Johnson. Thank you for a really interesting talk. I was curious about your median-based data cleaning technique. I think they're talking about the median-based Welch. Are you taking the median energy level at each frequency across many time samples? Do you think there are any downsides of median-based approaches for this domain?
That's a great question. So let's go back to that slide. So what we do is in regular Welch technique, we take the average of all the periodograms that we have. In the modified version, we take the median or any percentile that you want, but we use median here. We are able to remove the effect of outlier, but we need to correct the spectral level. We need to have the bias correction for that. That actually, if you take a look at this paper, we drive that equation for bias. So we fix the spectral level for that.
That's great, thank you. So I noticed, while you've got that up, that's a pretty clean time-dependent spectra. I don't see lots of holes and gaps. And I think, when you showed the central caldera one, there were a bunch of gaps in the data. How do those gaps and discontinuities impact? I assume if we see a big one, there's probably little tiny ones in there, like a couple hours or things like that. Maybe I'm wrong, but how do those missing data and those gaps in the data? Yeah, thank you. This is the one I was thinking of, and you can see the really big gaps. But how do smaller gaps, how do they impact your ability to analyze the data when you have these kinds of discontinuities and you're training models on these data that have discontinuities?
That's a great question. So usually we have smaller gaps in low frequency hydrophones and larger gaps in broadband hydrophones for many reasons. Maybe there is a technical issue in the OI cable or the instrument, or the data before coming to the website, the data may need to get filtered by Navy or other institutes in order to get. So we see some gaps in the data. Yeah. So, but in low frequency hydrophones, that gap is smaller. As you can see, we have one gap here and one gap here, maybe a little bit, some days missing here. But in broadband hydrophone, we see more. And if we have more gaps in the data, it's not easy to do the prediction as we wanted to do, especially since we only have 6 years of data. Maybe when we get more years of data, we can see some patterns. But with only 6 years of the data, no. So for the broadband hydrophone, it's hard to do prediction. For low frequencies, a little bit easier because we have smaller gaps.
You said something that I didn't anticipate when I was thinking about these data, is that the Navy may not want you to record all of these things. And so that was interesting. I hadn't anticipated.
Yeah, some of the gap is due to the Navy.
Interesting. There was a question that came in from Nicoletta Cristia. What you talked about wind and you talked about rain as sort of separate entities. Living in the Pacific Northwest, we know that they're often combined. How when they work together, how does that frustrate your analysis, and how do you handle that?
Actually, that's a great question. So there was a study before in the open ocean, and that they didn't see any dependency of noise. When we have rain, they didn't see any dependency on wind speed. But what we notice in the continental margin is that it's not only a function of rain rate, it's also a function of wind speed. So we need to have both in order to estimate the spectral level. But if you look at the sample spectrograms that I showed, for example, maybe I can show one more time. So this is a sample wind spectrogram, and then look at what we have for rain. You see the signature of noise is different. So when we do the analysis, we should separate them because the behavior is different. So that's why we divided wind noise and rain noise. But during rain events, wind also has great impact on spectral levels.
Yeah, thank you. But I think that visual, I didn't hear the difference, to be honest, but I think that visual representation really made it clear. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time today. And I've learned a ton about the OI data that I didn't know before, and that's fantastic. Are there any final remarks that you'd like to close with before we end today?
Maybe the final remark is that I think we should support this open data sets more. And these are great. OI especially is a great infrastructure that is supporting many research fields, many fields already. And we thank them for providing this open data set. It's not easy to conduct experiment in the ocean. It's not easy to maintain data. And with the OI data, we don't need to be worried about collecting data and maintaining data. We just need to focus on the research question that we want to answer, which is great.
That's super. Thank you so much. And with that, we close our formal program and look forward to hearing more from you, Shima, in the future. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.